I don't want to wade in between you and Steve and Nolan and Gersh. So I got two today for Dr. Varma. The first is, why are states like Arizona, Mississippi, Texas, which dropped mask mandates and lifted gathering restrictions, all trending down in infections and other metrics, and yet we've plateaued? In Texas's case, the mandates were dropped almost 3 weeks ago. So what falsifiable evidence would you need to say to see that we're doing something, that they're doing something right, but that New York isn't doing?
Dr. Varma.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. It requires a much longer answer than we can do during this press conference, but I really want to be very clear because this issue keeps coming up. If there was a simple preventive measure other than vaccinations available for COVID, then we would have figured it out. But what we have said repeatedly over and over again is that the best way to prevent COVID before we had vaccines and even until everybody gets vaccinated is multiple interventions done together, all of which are imperfect, but all need to be added up together. So if you want to answer the question the way you phrase it, like a falsifiable hypothesis, you have to account for every single factor that relates to COVID transmission. One of those is not just the policies on mask wearing, but it's where are people wearing them, what people are actually wearing them, and how frequently they're using it. So that's masks. But you also have to account for distance, which includes the density of your population. You have to account for frequency of hand washing because we know some things can be transmitted by person to person. You have to account for ventilation. You have to account for climatic conditions. So there are many, many factors that determine why some populations have higher rates than others. And then you have to also get into the much more complicated questions about the completeness of testing and recording and reporting of all of those things. And we know, for example, that in New York, we test per capita, as Ted can talk about separately, higher than any other jurisdiction on a regular basis. So I'll stop there because it's much harder to answer. But basically, the answer is to say, I know it would be nice to be able to give a simple answer that says, well, cases are going down here and they're not going there, therefore it's due to a policy. No, that's not actually the case. You need to have much, much deeper information so we know that.
I think that is, before we go back to Matt, Dr. Varma, I think that's a fantastic answer. And I think that last point, we are going out of our way to test a lot of people and be very transparent with the results. I think a big question in other parts of the country is, are we seeing the whole picture given the level of testing? Are we actually getting the whole truth or not? Go ahead, Matt.
Well, before I get to the second question, I would love to hear the more complete answer offline. But on to the second one. Which steps or components in the ordinary FDA approval process are missing for the coronavirus vaccines to be approved by the